The breaking point. The warning klaxons echoed through the corridors of Titan's Edge, like the death cries of some mechanical beast. Captain Sarah Chen pressed her palm against the cool metal wall of the mining station, feeling the vibrations that spoke of systems pushed beyond their limits. 3 months of this. 3 months of walking on eggshells around their so-called Saurian protectors. She pushed through the blast doors into the main operations center, where holographic displays painted the room in shades of amber and blue. The mining yields were down 40% from last quarter, and she knew exactly why. Every time her people tried to expand into the richer ore veins, the Saurians shut them down with claims of security protocols and territorial restrictions. Status report. Sarah called out to her chief engineer, Marcus Webb, who was hunched over a console that sparked intermittently. The same story, Captain, Marcus replied without looking up. His weathered face bore the lines of a man who had spent decades wrestling machinery into submission. Sector 7 is completely off-limits now. That's where the platinum deposits were showing the strongest readings. Sarah felt her jaw clench. Sector 7 had been their best hope of meeting the corporate quotas that would keep Titan's Edge operational. Without those resources, the mining station would become just another piece of orbital debris within the year. The blast doors hissed open again, and Commander Zekthul entered with the measured stride of someone accustomed to being obeyed without question. The Saurian stood nearly 7 feet tall, his reptilian features sharp and predatory beneath the ceremonial crest that marked his rank. His scales shifted from deep green to pale yellow as he moved, an involuntary display of emotional state that his species had never quite learned to control around humans. Captain Chen, Zekthul's voice carried the slight hiss that marked all Saurian speech, a reminder of their evolutionary origins. I trust you received our updated security parameters. Sarah turned to face him, her hands clenched into fists at her sides. The Saurian's eyes were like chips of polished obsidian, reflecting the light from the displays without revealing any hint of the thoughts behind them. She had learned to read the subtle color shifts in his scales better than most humans, and right now they showed the calm confidence of someone who believed they held all the cards. Your parameters are strangling us, Sarah said, her voice carefully controlled. We can't mine effectively with half the station declared off-limits. Security takes precedence over mining operations, Zekthul replied, his scales shifting to a deeper green that indicated mild irritation. The hegemony has invested considerable resources in protecting this facility. From what? Sarah demanded, finally letting some of her frustration bleed through. We've been here 3 years, and the only threats we've seen are the ones you keep warning us about. Meanwhile, my people are working double shifts trying to extract enough ore to justify our existence. Zekthul's head tilted slightly, a gesture that might have been curiosity in a human but was harder to interpret in a Saurian. Your existence is justified by the alliance between our species. The mining operation is secondary to the strategic value of this position. That was the final straw. Sarah had built Titan's Edge from a skeleton crew and a handful of outdated mining equipment into one of the most productive facilities in the Outer Rim. She had watched good people burn themselves out trying to meet impossible quotas while dealing with Saurian restrictions that seemed to change daily. Her crew looked to her for answers she didn't have and solutions that seemed increasingly impossible to find. Strategic value. Sarah's voice rose dangerously. You want to know about strategic value. My engineers are held together with stimulants and desperation. My miners are extracting barely enough ore to keep the lights on. And you stand there talking about the alliance like it means something when all I see is one species telling another how to live. The operations center had gone silent. Even the steady hum of the environmental systems seemed muted as every human in the room watched their captain face down the Saurian commander. Sarah could feel the weight of their expectations, their hopes that someone would finally say what they had all been thinking. Zekthul's scales had shifted to a deep amber, a color Sarah had learned indicated serious attention. You question the wisdom of the hegemony's decisions. I question the wisdom of restrictions that serve no purpose except to remind us who's in charge. Sarah shot back. My people are dying out here, Commander. Not from alien attacks or mysterious threats, but from exhaustion and despair. If that's the price of your protection, then maybe we don't need it." The silence stretched between them like a taut cable ready to snap. Sarah could hear her own heartbeat, could smell the recycled air that carried the metallic tang of overworked systems and human sweat. She had crossed a line, and everyone in the room knew it. Then Zekthul did something unexpected. His scales shifted to a pale blue, a color Sarah had never seen before. When he spoke, his voice carried none of its usual commanding tone. "You speak of protection as if it were optional," he said quietly, as if the hegemony's presence here were merely a political gesture. "Isn't it?" Sarah challenged. 3 years, Commander. 3 years of following protocols designed by people who have never set foot on a mining platform. 3 years of watching my crew work themselves to death, while you and your people stand guard against threats that never materialize. Zekthul's eyes fixed on hers with an intensity that made her want to step back. "Captain Chen, may I ask you a question?" The formality of the request caught her off guard. "Go ahead. What do you know about the silence?" Sarah blinked. "The what?" "The silence," Zekthul repeated. "The reason every ship that has attempted to survey the inner system has failed to return. The reason long-range sensors show nothing but empty space where there should be planets and asteroid fields." A cold knot formed in Sarah's stomach. "I don't know what you're talking about." Zekthul activated a holographic display with a gesture of his clawed hand. The familiar star map of the Kepler system appeared, but it was different from the one Sarah knew. Instead of the 5 inner planets and dense asteroid belt that standard navigation charts showed, there was nothing. Empty space stretching from the third planet to the outer gas giants. "This is what our deep space sensors actually detect," Zekthul said. "Everything inside the third planet's orbit appears to be gone. Not destroyed, not relocated, simply absent, as if it had never existed." Sarah stared at the display, her mind struggling to process what she was seeing. "That's impossible. We have ships that have traveled through the inner system. Trade routes, survey missions. Ships that have never returned," Zekthul corrected. "Ships whose last transmission spoke of normal operations before falling silent. The hegemony has lost 17 vessels attempting to investigate this phenomenon." The operations center felt suddenly colder. Sarah could see her reflection in the holographic display, her face pale with the realization of what Zekthul was telling her. "Why wasn't I told about this?" "Because the hegemony's synapsychologists believed that humans would react poorly to the knowledge that something was systematically removing matter from reality itself," Zekthul said. "They thought it would cause panic, possibly retreat from the system entirely." Sarah felt anger flare again, but it was different now. Not the hot rage of frustrated authority, but the cold fury of someone who had been lied to. "So you decided to keep us in the dark while you used us as bait." "We decided to keep you safe while we investigated," Zekthul corrected. "The restrictions you find so onerous are designed to keep Titan's Edge from suffering the same fate as those missing ships." "And what makes you think we're safe here?" Zekthul's scales shifted to a deep red, a color Sarah had learned meant fear or extreme caution. "Because 3 days ago, our long-range sensors detected movement in the inner system. Something is coming, Captain Chen. Something that has been hiding behind the silence for months, possibly years." The holographic display shifted, zooming in on the empty space between the second and third planets. At first, Sarah saw nothing but the usual scattering of background radiation and cosmic dust. Then Zekthul enhanced the display, and she saw it. A distortion in space itself, like heat shimmer rising from hot pavement, but moving with obvious purpose. "What is it?" she whispered. "We don't know," Zekthul admitted. "But it's headed directly for Titan's Edge, and it will arrive within 48 hours. Sarah felt the weight of command settle on her shoulders like a lid blanket. Everything she had thought she knew about their situation had just been turned upside down. The Saurians weren't occupying her station out of political convenience or species arrogance. They were genuinely trying to protect her people from something that defied understanding. She looked around the operations center, seeing her crew with new eyes. These weren't just miners and engineers following corporate orders. They were human beings whose lives depended on decisions she was about to make. The anger was still there, but it had transformed into something else. Determination. Purpose. "You should have told me sooner," she said finally. "Perhaps," Zekthul agreed. "But would you have believed me, or would you have thought it was another Saurian attempt to control human operations?" Sarah considered that. Given her state of mind over the past few months, he was probably right. She would have dismissed it as propaganda or manipulation. The irony was bitter. In her effort to protect her crew from what she saw as Saurian oppression, she had been fighting against the very people trying to keep them alive. "What do you need from us?" she asked. Zekthul's scales shifted to a warmer yellow. What Sarah had learned was something like approval or respect. "Your cooperation, Captain, and your ingenuity. Saurian technology is advanced, but it follows predictable patterns. Whatever is coming has proven immune to conventional approaches. We may need human creativity to survive what's coming." Sarah looked at her crew, seeing the fear and confusion in their faces. They were looking to her for leadership, for answers to questions she was still learning to ask. But they were also looking at her with trust, the kind of faith that came from working together through countless crises. "All right, Commander," she said. "You want cooperation. You've got it. But from now on, no more secrets. My people deserve to know what they're facing." "Agreed," Zekthul said simply. "And Commander." Sarah's voice carried a new edge, not of anger but of determination. "When this is over, we're going to have a long conversation about trust and respect. Because partnership means both species get to make decisions, not just follow orders." Zekthul's scales shifted to a color Sarah had never seen before, a deep purple that seemed to shimmer with its own light. "I look forward to that conversation, Captain Chen." As if summoned by their words, the station's warning systems activated again. But this time, the klaxons carried a different tone. Not the routine alerts of system malfunctions or minor emergencies, but the harsh, urgent shriek that meant immediate danger. Marcus looked up from his console, his face pale. "Captain, we're getting massive energy readings from the inner system. Whatever that thing is, it's accelerating." Sarah felt her pulse quicken. "Time to contact." 36 hours, Marcus replied. "Maybe less." Sarah looked at Zekthul, seeing her own determination reflected in his alien features. The anger was still there, but it had found a new target. Not the Saurian who had been trying to protect her people, but whatever force was threatening everything they had built. "Then we'd better get to work," she said. The Crucible. The next 30 hours passed in a blur of activity that transformed Titan's Edge from a mining station into something resembling a fortress. Sarah watched from the command center as human engineers worked alongside Saurian technicians, their initial wariness giving way to professional respect as they tackled problems that neither species could solve alone. The station's mining lasers had been reconfigured as defensive weapons, their cutting beams powerful enough to slice through asteroid rock, now focused into coherent energy arrays. The cargo bays had been converted into emergency shelters, reinforced with void steel plating that the Saurians had provided from their own ship's hull. Sarah found herself working more closely with Zekthul than she had in the previous 3 months combined. The Saurian commander had shed his formal military bearing, revealing a sharp tactical mind that complemented her own engineering background. Together, they had developed a defensive strategy that played to both species' strengths. "The entity is maintaining a steady approach vector," reported Lieutenant Torres from the sensor station. "Estimated contact in 6 hours." Sarah studied the tactical display, watching the distortion that marked their approaching visitor. It moved through space like a ripple in reality itself, bending light and energy around it in patterns that hurt to look at directly. The closer it came, the more pronounced the effect became. "Any response to our communication attempts?" she asked. "Nothing," Torres replied. "It doesn't seem to acknowledge our transmissions at all." Zekthul approached the display, his scales shifting through a spectrum of colors that Sarah had learned indicated deep concentration. The pattern is consistent with the last signals we received from the missing ships. They reported similar distortions approaching their positions before communication ceased. Maybe they weren't destroyed, Sarah suggested. Maybe they were taken somewhere. Where? Zekthul asked. Our sensors show no trace of them anywhere in the system. Before Sarah could answer, the lights flickered throughout the command center. Emergency power kicked in automatically, bathing everything in the red glow of combat lighting. The steady hum of the station's systems changed pitch, becoming irregular and strained. "Captain," Marcus called from the engineering station, his voice tight with concern. "We're experiencing massive power fluctuations. Something is interfering with our reactor core." Sarah moved to his station, reading the displays over his shoulder. The reactor was still operating, but its output was becoming increasingly unstable. Energy levels spiked and dropped in patterns that made no sense according to any known physics. "How close is that thing?" she demanded. "Still 4 hours out," Torres replied. "But the interference is getting stronger." Zekthul joined them at the engineering station, his clawed fingers dancing over the Saurian interface panels with practiced ease. "Our ship is experiencing similar effects. Whatever this entity is, it affects both our technologies equally." A new alarm sounded, this one from the Mining Operations Center. Sarah split her attention between the reactor readings and the mining reports, her mind racing to connect the patterns she was seeing. "Captain," called Chief Petty Officer Kim from the mining station. "The ore processing facility is showing massive energy readings. The refined materials are resonating with something." Sarah felt a chill of recognition. "What kind of materials?" "Heavy elements mostly. Platinum, iridium, some of the rare earth compounds we extract from the asteroid belt." "Zekthul," Sarah said urgently. "The missing ships, the survey vessels that disappeared, what were they carrying?" The Saurian's eyes widened slightly, the first time Sarah had seen him show obvious surprise. "Cargo manifests indicate refined metals, processed ores suitable for industrial applications. It's not interested in us," Sarah realized. "It's interested in what we've been mining." The implications hit her like a physical blow. Titan's Edge wasn't just a mining station. It was a collection point for exactly the materials that seemed to attract this entity. Every ship that had vanished had been carrying refined metals, and now they had concentrated tons of the same materials in a single location. "We need to jettison the cargo," she said. "Captain," Marcus protested, "that's 3 months of mining operations. The corporate bosses will have our heads." "They'll have more than our heads if we don't survive the next few hours," Sarah shot back. "Start emergency cargo ejection procedures. Get all refined materials as far from the station as possible." Zekthul was already moving toward the Saurian command interface. "I'll coordinate with our ship to provide covering fire if the entity attempts to interfere." The next hour was chaos barely held in check by training and desperation. Cargo containers streamed away from Titan's Edge like metallic confetti, their contents representing millions of credits worth of refined materials. Sarah watched the displays as container after container was launched into space, carrying away everything her crew had worked to extract. But the power fluctuations were decreasing. As the last of the heavy metal compounds left the station, the reactor settled into a steadier rhythm. The interference that had been plaguing their systems began to fade. "Entity is changing course," Torres reported. "It's following the cargo containers." Sarah felt a moment of triumph, quickly followed by a new concern. "How many containers?" 47 launched successfully, Marcus replied. "But Captain, Container 33 is reporting a malfunction. Its engines failed during launch. It's drifting on a ballistic trajectory that will bring it back to the station in approximately 2 hours." Sarah's blood ran cold. One container, carrying several tons of processed platinum and rare earth elements, was going to return just as the entity finished collecting the others. It would lead the entity directly back to Titan's Edge. "Can we destroy it?" she asked. Not without risking damage to the station, Marcus replied. The container's trajectory will bring it too close to our hull. Our ship's weapons have the range, Zekthul offered, but not the precision. We would risk hitting the station. Sarah stared at the tactical display, watching the entity move through the scattered cargo containers like a shark through a school of fish. Each container vanished as the distortion field passed over it, not destroyed but simply erased from existence. When it finished with the cargo, it would follow the trajectory of the failed container directly to their location. There has to be another way, she muttered, her engineering mind racing through possibilities. Then an idea began to form. Dangerous, possibly suicidal. But it might work. Marcus, what's the status of mining platform 7? Marcus checked his displays. Still operational. But it's been shut down for maintenance. Why? Because it's equipped with a short-range quantum drive for repositioning operations, Sarah said. And it's currently positioned between us and the trajectory of that container. Understanding dawned in Marcus's eyes. You want to use the platform as an interceptor. The quantum drive has enough power to move the platform into the container's path, Sarah continued. If we time it right, we can catch the container and jump it to a safe distance. That's insane, Marcus protested. The platform's drive system isn't designed for that kind of precision maneuvering. One miscalculation and you'll tear the platform apart. I'll pilot it myself, Sarah said. Captain. No, Zekthul interrupted. The risk is too great. If you fail, both the platform and the container will be lost, and the entity will still track the remaining signature to this station. Then I won't fail, Sarah said simply. She was already moving toward the shuttle bay, her mind focused on the technical challenges ahead. The quantum drive was designed for moving mining platforms to new positions around asteroids, not for precision intercept maneuvers. She would have to modify the drive parameters on the fly, calculating trajectories and jump coordinates with no room for error. Captain, Zekthul called after her. There may be another option. Sarah paused, turning to look at the Saurian commander. His scales had shifted to a deep blue. The color she had learned indicated serious concern. Our ship carries emergency beacons designed to attract rescue vessels, he said. If we could modify one to mimic the signature of the refined materials, we could draw the entity away from the station. How long would that take? Sarah asked. Several hours to modify the beacon, additional time to deploy it at sufficient distance. Sarah shook her head. We don't have that kind of time. The container will be back in less than 2 hours. Captain, Marcus said from the engineering station, I'm reading massive energy buildup from the entity's position. It's finished collecting the cargo containers and is beginning to accelerate toward us. The decision was made for her. Sarah sprinted toward the shuttle bay, her crew's voices calling after her with last-minute suggestions and desperate alternatives. But she knew there was no time for alternatives. The mining platform was their only hope of intercepting the failed container before it led the entity to Titan's edge. The shuttle ride to Platform 7 took 15 minutes that felt like hours. Sarah used the time to study the platform's systems, familiarizing herself with modifications that had been made since the last time she had piloted one. The quantum drive was more powerful than she remembered, but also more unstable. The engineers had been pushing the system beyond its design parameters to handle the larger asteroids in this sector. Platform 7 hung in space like a mechanical spider, its drilling arms and processing equipment folded against its central hub. Sarah docked the shuttle and transferred to the platform's control center, a cramped compartment filled with displays and manual control interfaces. Platform 7 to Titan's edge, she called over the comm system. I'm in position and beginning drive initialization. Roger, Captain, came Torres's voice. Entity is 1 hour 20 minutes from station position. Container trajectory remains unchanged. Sarah's hands moved over the control panels with practiced efficiency, bringing the quantum drive online and calculating the intercept trajectory. The mathematics were complex, requiring her to account for the platform's mass, the container's velocity, and the precise timing needed to match vectors. "Drive system online," she reported. "Beginning approach to intercept coordinates." The platform shuddered as the quantum drive engaged, reality bending around the small craft as it translated through folded space. Sarah felt the familiar disorientation of quantum travel, the sensation of existing in multiple locations simultaneously before reality snapped back into focus. She emerged from the jump precisely where she had calculated, directly in the path of the approaching container. But the container was moving faster than expected, its trajectory altered by the gravitational pull of a nearby asteroid. "Adjusting position," Sarah called, her fingers flying over the controls as she recalculated the intercept angle. The platform's thrusters fired, pushing it into a new position just as the container came into visual range. Sarah could see it tumbling slowly end over end, its cargo of refined metals creating interference patterns in the local electromagnetic field. "Contact in 30 seconds, she announced. The platform's manipulator arms extended, their magnetic grapples reaching for the spinning container. Sarah held her breath as the grapples closed, their magnetic fields locking onto the container's hull with a satisfying clang. "Got it," she called triumphantly. Then the entity arrived. The distortion field swept over both the platform and the container like a wave of twisted reality. Sarah felt the platform's systems scream in protest as forces beyond human understanding tore at the fabric of space around them. The quantum drive overloaded, its containment field fluctuating wildly as it tried to maintain stability in an environment where the laws of physics seemed negotiable. "Emergency jump," Sarah muttered, her hands working frantically to input new coordinates that would take both platform and container far from Titan's edge. The drive engaged just as the distortion field reached critical intensity. Sarah felt reality tear around her like wet paper, the platform and its cargo translating through dimensions that had no names. Colors that didn't exist painted her vision as she experienced the sensation of being stretched across vast distances while simultaneously compressed into a single point. When the jump completed, Sarah found herself floating in empty space, nearly a light hour from Titan's edge. The platform's systems were failing, their circuits overloaded by the strain of jumping while partially caught in the entity's influence. But they had succeeded. The container was secure, its cargo of refined metals now too distant to attract the entity back to the station. "Platform 7 to Titan's edge," Sarah called weakly. "Mission accomplished. Container secure at coordinates." She rattled off the numbers, her voice growing faint as the platform's life support systems began to fail. "Roger, Captain," came Zekthal's voice over the comm. "Entity is departing the system. We're dispatching rescue shuttles to your position." Sarah slumped back in the control chair, exhaustion washing over her as the adrenaline faded. Through the platform's viewports, she could see stars wheeling slowly as the damaged craft tumbled through space. In the distance, so far away it was barely visible, she could make out the lights of Titan's edge. When the rescue shuttle arrived, Zekthal was aboard personally. The Saurian commander helped her transfer from the failing platform to the safety of the shuttle, his scaled hands gentle despite their obvious strength. "That was either the bravest or most foolish thing I have ever witnessed," he said as they settled into the shuttle's passenger compartment. "Probably both," Sarah admitted. "But it worked." "Yes," Zekthal agreed. "It worked because you saw a solution that neither human nor Saurian tactical doctrine would have suggested. Your species' capacity for creative thinking under pressure is remarkable." Sarah looked at him, seeing something new in his alien features. Not the patronizing approval of a superior officer, but genuine respect between equals. "We make a good team," she said. "Indeed," Zekthal replied. "Perhaps it is time for the hegemony to reconsider its approach to human partnerships." The shuttle docked with Titan's edge to find the entire crew waiting in the bay. Human and Saurian personnel stood together, their earlier tensions forgotten in the face of shared danger and mutual success. Sarah saw Marcus grinning widely, and even the normally stoic Saurian technicians seemed to be showing approval in the subtle color shifts of their scales. "Captain on deck," someone called, and both human and Saurian personnel came to attention. Sarah waved them at ease, feeling embarrassed by the attention. "It was a team effort," she said. "Human ingenuity and Saurian technology, working together. The first of many such collaborations, I hope," Zekthul added. "Captain Chen has shown me that true partnership requires trust from both sides." Later, as the station returned to normal operations, Sarah found herself in her quarters reviewing the events of the past few days. The anger she had felt toward Zekthul seemed like a relic from another lifetime. In its place was something more valuable. Mutual respect earned through shared adversity. A soft chime indicated someone at her door. "Come in." Zekthul entered, his scales showing the warm yellow that indicated satisfaction. "I wanted to thank you, Captain, for what you did today and for teaching me something important about leadership." "What's that?" Sarah asked. "That respect cannot be demanded," Zekthul said. "It must be earned through actions, not words, and it must flow both ways." Sarah smiled. "That's step one. Now let's work on partnership." Zekthul's scales shifted to that deep purple she had seen before, the color she was beginning to think indicated something like joy. "I look forward to that, Captain Chen. I believe this is the beginning of something remarkable." As the Saurian commander left her quarters, Sarah looked out the viewport at the stars beyond. Somewhere out there, the entity continued its mysterious mission, collecting refined metals for purposes unknown. But for the first time since arriving at Titan's Edge, she felt confident about the future. Humanity and the Saurian hegemony had faced the unknown together and emerged stronger for it. It was, as Zekthul had said, the beginning of something remarkable.